Greetings, America. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk. If you are paying attention, I'm wearing my red clothing. I have a red undershirt and a red shirt on in honor of Red Friday, RED, Remember Everyone Deployed. I think just purely out of coincidence, it seems that Fridays tend to be my best days where I'm available to make a video. Perhaps the job I have, we maybe front load the majority of our work Monday through Thursday, and then kind of allows us to not work so hard on Friday while yet still working. But who knows? Any number of things could happen. That being said, the last video I posted, I introduced the concept of boundaries in terms of left versus right, and I know I've got an unfortunate habit of being redundant. That could be due to several reasons, but whatever the case may be, I'm trying to be very mindful of my redundancy, as well as talking about politics because so many other people talk about politics. But where do you blur the line and or create a line that separates socially trending topics and politics, because sometimes they merge together. And the last video I spoke about boundaries, limitations, where the right respects certain boundaries and the left does not. And I made the analogy of the cliff, where if two people, one on the left, one on the right, arrive at the edge of a cliff face, the one on the right will be like, well, this is it. There's no further I can go. There's the edge of a cliff. And the one on the left would not find that acceptable. They would, maybe blame society, systemic racism, the government, whatever the case may be, and demand more cliff be built or a bridge, or that the person on the right carries them down. And I obviously I've made that video. But in the concept of boundaries, it makes me wonder and rethink. I'm in my 40s. I'll be 45 this year. I was born in 76. I was in high school from 90 to 94. So that gives you an idea of my generation. My generation was still allowed to go outside and play, to include outside of view of our parents. Depending on how you grew up, I know from time to time I had to check in, because my parents had gotten worried that they had just gotten worried that I was going extended periods of time without any kind of acknowledgement. So I would have to check in periodically. But even then, as strict as my parents were compared to some of the other kids I grew up with, I still had a lot of freedoms and liberties. Both of my parents worked, and therefore both of my parents were not subject to talk television. And I've mentioned this before, where there's potentially an entire generation of kids, no fault of their own, who had at least one parent, more than likely a mom, who stayed at home and watched a lot of talk television, where all these micro issues were brought to your living room via the television set, and it started to make it feel like these micro issues that happened on a microcosm were taking place everywhere. That every issue that was brought to you by Oprah and Sally Jesse Raphael and Ricky Lake and Maury Povich and all these other people that had a daytime talk show made it start to feel like everything was in your backyard. And then you start getting helicopter parents from the mid to late 80s, all the way into the 90s and to the present. And I find myself guilty, and I've probably mentioned this in one or two videos, where I don't give my kids nearly as much leeway as I had, because I don't want to be one of those statistics. I don't want to be one of those parents on TV. We thought this would never happen. This is such a safe place, blah blah, And I often question what that does. All right? And I'll share at the risk of oversharing. My daughter just recently went through driver's ed. So earlier this year, she had to take the classroom portion. It is no longer mandatory in schools, it's considered extracurricular and you have to request and sign up for it, providing there's a space available. When I went through first semester of my sophomore year because of my birth date, and I can't remember, what I can't remember honestly is whether I had my permit or not, or if I got it in class. I don't remember how that works. Maybe somebody watching this can correct me. But I did the classroom portion and I did the driving portion, and if you got a high enough grade, I think an A, all you had to do was on your 16th birthday go take your photo and get your license. If you got a B or less, you had to take the driving test. Now, so my daughter did the whole extracurricular thing. She did 4 days of classes at the high school after school, and then when there was space available, she had to do the 4 days of driving. She ended up with the teacher that taught the classroom portion, and she didn't like her. There was a personality dispute, so to speak. The teacher's just doing her job, but my daughter didn't like her. And my thought process was tough shit, deal with it, suck it up. It's 4 evenings, 3 hours apiece. That's 12 hours of your life where you've got to deal with this person for such a short amount of time compared to the rest of your lifespan. But my wife caved in and catered to my daughter's opinion and had her removed, and then we had to contact, well, she contacted the county and got my daughter eventually placed with a different teacher. And granted, I had no part in that decision. I was a little disappointed in that because I think building those emotional calluses is important. Because once they leave here, they need to be strong enough to deal with the real world. And I often wonder if what we're seeing right now is the culmination of parents who were overprotective of their kids, but now there's really not much of a choice. You have to send those kids out into the real world. So you have an entire population of people born between the mid to late 80s and then 90s, etc. I mean, my God, if you were born in 2000, depending on your birthday, you'll be old enough to drink this year. So you have a whole generation of people in their mid to early 30s, early 20s, so on and so forth, that are currently leaving the nest, but yet still have that mentality of how they were treated growing up. You're special, timeouts, you never did anything wrong, you just misunderstood, whatever the case may be. And while there's a certain point in life where I think you challenge certain things, you challenge certain societal norms, you challenge certain rules and laws, and I know that was not certainly lost on my generation. Um, I think what we're currently seeing is what a battalion commander of mine had once given a little speech, and he was like, "You need to understand," and I think he did this with staff NCOs and officers. Now, if you never served in the military, it's okay if you don't understand that. Senior enlisted and the commissioned officers. Um, and he basically said, "You do understand that we're getting ready to go to Afghanistan, where the majority of our troops, the majority of our trigger pullers, are part of that participation award generation where you showed up and you're special. You're a special little angel. So here's your trophy. There's no first place, second place, or third place. Everybody's a winner." And that's bullshit. Because in real life, no matter how you try to play this game, there are winners and there are losers. There are those who succeed and there are those who don't. There are people who suck and there are people who are good at things. All right. There are people who are born and destined to succeed. There are people who are going to be naturally productive members of society. And there are people who just won't. And that is the sad truth of it, and we're trying to build this society right now where we're not respecting that. We're not respecting certain laws of nature. And that goes back to my respecting boundaries. Nature itself, nature itself ultimately wins, and we're not respecting those boundaries. I spoke about the whole thing with Gina Carano and this cancel culture, and now we're canceling Dr. Seuss. Quite honestly, I didn't know Dr. Seuss. I don't know his politics. I don't know his prejudices. I grew up on his books. So, quite frankly, I don't know if he deserves to be canceled or not. But when you think about this concept of boundaries, whether it's socially acceptable boundaries, whether it's the laws of nature and the boundaries that nature will automatically impose, when is enough enough? And if we just take the concept of cancel culture, when is enough enough? And one thought I had was, if you take somebody who is like Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, if he is supposed to be the epitome of what it is to be woke, what it is to be on the left, if you're not supposed to get any more left than him, if you're not supposed to be any more woke than him, look at what he's currently going through. And that's just an example. If you take somebody, regardless of their complexion, regardless of their gender or gender preferences, oh dear God, who's on the left, who is woke, who is, so hyper aware of everything and is an expert at preventing microaggressions and triggering speech, do they have to reach a culminating point? Do they have to reach a point when they're like, wait a minute, because they become a victim of cancel culture? Or is it going to be something else? Because, again, and I've said this numerous times and I apologize for being redundant, if we believe the numbers, 81 million people voted for Biden, 74 million people voted for Trump, which, by the way, puts it at over 150 million voters, and you can go online, you can physically research this yourself. There's only 133 million registered voters, but that's not the topic of this conversation. You're basically saying that regardless of skin complexion, that 81 million people, whether they're 100% all in or partially in, you're basically saying that you're looking to dominate and cancel the 74 million. I mean, I'll say it again. Katie Couric said 74 million people need to be reprogrammed, and other people like her said that 74 million people need to be retrained. And at the risk of repeating myself excessively, we have a media system right now that can create a lie and then basically publish the lie and then reinforce the lie. And I think there's a phrase out there, I forget who said it, but it's like, if you're the first to establish a lie and reinforce the lie, you can eventually get people to believe in the lie. Because I understand people didn't like Trump and he potentially lost a personality contest, not a political contest. All right, where people didn't care so much about what he did. They just, politically speaking, they cared more about how he conducted himself, and that's fine. You're free to do so. But he was fighting against a lot of these things, this cancel culture, this excessively biased media, and all these different things. Because I'm telling you, if we continue to disrespect boundaries, if we continue to disrespect acceptable limitations, we will reach a culminating point. Nature demands that we reach a culminating point. What is acceptable to you? That is my ultimate question. What is acceptable to you? Are you on the side where we need to continue to white shame and male shame and heterosexuality shame and any other shaming that's out there? Until either you've beaten straight white males into oblivion or until you've backed them into a corner and then they fight back. I mean, which one is it? Because again, there's going to be a limitation. And I just use that as an example. What is the acceptable limitation? What is the limit of advance? Where is the go no further than? Because as of right now, I just don't know what it is. And I'm just tired of waking up in the morning and just it seems like you can't ignore it. I mean, God, you turn on ESPN and even they're flooding you with wokeness. You go to the Weather Channel. Well, at some point in time, if you watch the Weather Channel long enough, there's some wokeness going on. Like, well, now that we're getting flooded, as you can see, the white people are getting help, but the people of color are not getting help. And it's like, really? Really? I mean, it's the Weather Channel. Since when was weather racist? But, it's just, I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear your thoughts and your views. And by all means, there's numerous ways to get in touch with me. You don't have to be public about it as far as whether you want to leave a comment on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. You can get a hold of me privately, and I won't dime you out, but I will potentially discuss your thoughts and then respond to them. But I'd like to hear what you think, because regardless of whether you're on the right or the left, okay, you have your reasons for doing so. And I don't hate you for it. I don't demonize you for it. I don't dehumanize you for it. But I think we need to start coming together and having these conversations, and maybe starting to meet in the middle. All right. I've said this numerous times. I'm not a registered Republican. Do I tend to vote Republican more often than I vote outside Republican? Yes. Why? It's the St. Bernard and the Chihuahua. I I openly despise the Democratic Party. I think of them as the St. Bernard, and I think of the Republicans as the Chihuahua. They're both going to take a crap in my yard. Which mess do you want to clean up? You know, I've said Republicans, I find them to be less offensive. But no, I'm not 100% in love with the Republican Party. That being said, whether you're on the right or the left, I think we as a society need to try and meet in the middle and have conversations and find out where we can agree, because you know politics aside, politicians either take advantage of existing social trends, or they tried to ride the wave of a social trend. And whether it's this victim celebration, whatever the case may be, trust me when I say this: Mother Nature will create a limitation. Mother Nature will create a boundary, and she will enforce it, because it's just the way it is. You cannot fight the laws of nature on this. And take whatever example you want. All right, if you continue to shame white people, you continue to shame men, you continue to shame heterosexuality, and you continue to push and push and push, at some point in time, people are going to fight back. All right? I mean, the last thing I just saw recently is that Nancy Pelosi, because, she's such a winner, is considering whether or not to reinforce security at the Capitol, which is the people's building. That is where your representatives are, where you are supposed to be free and clear to go and meet with your representatives, provided that they're available. And she's talking about putting walls up around that and whatnot. Walls to protect her and her fellow congressmen and women and senators from Americans, but yet Americans are not allowed to put up walls to protect America. Think about that. I'll leave you with this. You ever heard the phrase, good fences make good neighbors? I'll just leave it at that. But let me know what you think. Hit like if you like this video. Hit subscribe if you want to be notified when I make more. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I make more. But please leave a comment. Let's try and have the conversation. I'll also put this on Instagram and Facebook. And if you're in the local area, if you got my number, or we see each other on a routine basis, feel free to let me know what you think, and I will respond. That's all I got. Y'all take care.